Open your eyes and you will see that America is still the land of the free.
Welcome to the Voice of Freedom, your national beacon of liberty. Now, here's your Voice of Freedom, Brent Johnson.
Peter Joseph has created quite a stir, not just in the United States, but all over the world, with the release of his first film, Zeitgeist, and then he followed that with Zeitgeist Addendum. He's the founder of the Zeitgeist movement, which seeks to install a global resource-based economy and remove the monetary paradigm current social model, and I think we all know exactly why. Dr. Peter Joseph, thank you for joining us. We are honored. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, David. It's good to be back. It's good to hear your voice, and I'm happy to be on.
I'm glad to have you. Okay, now, for all those folks out there that always ask, what the heck does zeitgeist mean? Would you explain the definition, or your definition, of zeitgeist?
Sure. There's a few working definitions out there. I simply use it to represent the collective awareness of a culture, that aspect of human society, those values that we all seem to share at a specific point in time. And the question is, are those values and are those systems, are those structures that we have in place actually viable? And that's, of course, a difficult cultural question. So the zeitgeist are those shared values that we think might be true, but maybe they're not. Maybe we should start thinking about other alternatives to certain things that are going on. But the technical definition is spirit of the age, which is a gestural notion, but I use it in a more intellectual sense as far as shared values.
Okay, very good. That's sort of exactly what I believe the definition was, but a lot of folks ask, and, the best thing I could do is say it is the spirit of the age, and I think the spirit of the age that we've been living in for the past, almost 2,000 years, or over 2,000 years, has been deception. Well, let me move right into it. Your first film, Zeitgeist, came out in, what was it, 2005 that you released that?
Actually, no, it was 2007.
Oh, well, really? Okay,
yep.
Boy, time goes by quickly, I guess.
It does. That'll be July of 2007, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Well, in that time, the Zeitgeist film immediately went global. Because, I remember in 2008, I was in in Australia. And they had already established an international Zeitgeist Day, and all over the globe, they were showing copies of your film. Did you have any idea whatsoever that when you released this film that this would go global as quickly as it did, and what has been the ramification?
Well, no. I had no intention of such an awareness being sparked when I first created that project. It was quite fascinating, and it blew my mind. I think ultimately what it came down to is it wasn't as much the film itself, but what people saw in the film and what it meant to them, and this overarching need, I think, across the world these days, that we have to start thinking about some new alternatives to our current social structures, both ideological and physical. So, Zeitgeist Day materialized right after it came out, the March, after the release. And I did it as an experiment, to be perfectly frank. I was like, well, let's see what people are willing to do to push forward some of this information. And it sparked, in fact, a global phenomenon which carries over into this coming year. As we could talk about later in the show, we have Zeitgeist Day again coming up in mid-March, March 13th. And this is a much more focused event, based around the Zeitgeist movement. And it's fascinating. It's truly wonderful to see all the cultures of the world slowly start to come together with a common viewpoint. And that's really the whole point.
Well, I think that we're all starting to see, and also, more importantly, feel that the direction that the entire Western world has taken, basically being motivated by a profit rather than progress or people or peace. We can all see where it's taken this world. The world is on the brink of global war, of absolute financial collapse. And mankind and civilization seems to have just taken a wrong turn and is just now starting to realize it. Now, I realize that you've also faced a lot of opposition, especially with the first segment of the first film that you put out there, which basically went after religion. Now, it did not go after God. I think that you're a very spiritual person, and our conversations that we've had in the past, I think I know where you're coming from. But unfortunately, some people just seem to miss the point. And when they started making copies and distributing them, they started taking out the first segment. Let me ask you, how did that make you feel? Do you feel that people missed the point, or do you think that they were just misguided, or do you think that this is an active campaign to discredit and somehow take away from the thrust of your project?
Well, it's a complex point, and the emotional ramifications that we all have when it comes to our sense of identity. You know, when you're brought up in a particular belief system, whether the belief system is true or not, tends to go to the wayside when it becomes threatened because of our emotional attachments to it. You know, and this goes for just about anything. This could be said for our social structures. I think there has been a great amount of misinterpretation of that opening section of the film. My intent was never to insult people or to even insult any particular religion or anything like that. It was simply to give a viewpoint that was very little discussed about the origins of religion, and there, in part, some political ramifications of religion and how it's been used for the political establishment in malicious ways. I have, as you mentioned, and I really always appreciated the way you correctly interpreted that work, David, because you know, a lot of people out there in the religious community, they tend to take extreme odds and do not seem to understand what the point of that section was. People's religion should be their own religion, in the sense that they should be novel enough in their interpretation of whatever sacred text that they're referring to accept it on their own accord and not be thrown into disarray just because someone else has a different perspective. So I guess in the end, you know, even though there's been I get lots of negative feedback still, it's slowly coming forward, I think, and as I produce new films and I clarify my position, it's slowly coming forward what the point of that section actually was. And I'm not as much worried about it anymore. I think I've made a lot of great friends across all religions because of the movement, and they understand what that section was actually about. And it wasn't an insolent section. It was there to shake things up a little bit and say, you know what, there might be some things that tradition has told you that do not link back and do not have a logical train of thought to actually denote certain historicities or certain historical elements that have been accepted through time, but the more you put a magnifying glass underneath it, just like anything in our history, you tend to find different answers and different sources. So,
Dr. Joseph, Brent Johnson here. When I saw that first part, I have to tell you that I'm dedicated to truth. That is my guiding light, my North Star. And so wherever I see truth, I'm willing to see it, even if it's upsetting my lifestyle or turning my perceptions upside down. When I saw that part, it definitely affected me in that, you know, as you're saying, it was hitting upon a very personal, intimate subject around religion, God, and such. But I found it personally eye-opening and fascinating. And coming away saying, I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm very, very glad to have been exposed to that first section. And I will go back and look at it again and again, because I think it's brilliant and brilliantly portrayed.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, you know, once again, I think everyone, even if they feel challenged, that we should be open to new information. I am always open to people challenging anything I talk about. In fact, my favorite disposition is to be challenged. So I think we should all have the integrity of what we believe in, to be able to accept others to disagree with us, of course, and to really look into new information about belief systems that have been around and have a strong traditional presence. It's just one of those things that happens with people. They tend to reject new information because their identity becomes so ingrained and indoctrinated, and this, of course, goes for the political sphere probably more than anything else. But anyway, I appreciate that comment.
Yeah, I wanted to point out that it seems that more and more people are becoming aware of the cancer of corporatism. In other words, as we mentioned before, the idea that profit is more important than any other thing. And the idea of moving into a world that has no money, that is sort of alluded to in the Venus Project's section of the second film, Zeitgeist Addendum. I was wondering if you might clarify a little bit more for the listeners out there that don't quite get where you're going with this and where this concept of the Venus Project is. how can we possibly think of a world that has no money? How could that possibly work?
Right. Well, I think I have to state that I think it's an inevitability. First of all, I'd like to point out that what's happening in the world today, we've become absolutely decoupled from the natural world, meaning our distribution and production processes do not have a frame of reference going back to the materials of the planet. All you have to do is think about our reliance on fossil fuels, from every power station to every automobile to all of our plastics and everything, to see that we are in an unsustainable paradigm. And the problem with the monetary incentive, if you will, the profit incentive, is that it creates a form of paralysis.